Story 1, Warning Sign. My wife and I were driving down a dark road on our way to Colorado for our honeymoon. It had to be around midnight, and I'd been driving for hours. My wife was fast asleep in the back seat, and I had nobody to talk to. So I listened to the radio to keep me from dozing off. They were playing Wouldn't It Be Nice by the Beach Boys, a song that I've loved since I were a young boy. I was singing along to the tune as quietly as I could, trying not to wake my wife. That's when it suddenly got foggy out. The snow that we were warned about started falling, and the radio turned to static. The fact that we were the only ones on the road was very unsettling. We hadn't seen another car since we drove by that gas station almost 2 hours before. It was frightening, to say the least. I continued driving despite the fact that I could barely see. Static continued to restrain the radio from playing my favorite childhood song. I don't know why. Maybe it was the fact that it was really foggy out, but I felt that something bad was bound to happen. The radio was getting louder even though I had turned the thing off. I was hearing voices. They were coming from the radio. I thought that I was hearing things because I was dreadfully tired. It sounded like a woman. Her voice echoed out of the radio. Evil lie. As ahead, she said. I was looking down at the radio, trying to get it to turn off. When I looked up at the road, a woman in a white gown walked right in front of my car. It was unexpected. I looked away for only a second. I stopped the car and pulled over to the side of the road. My wife had woken up at that point. I hit someone. I told her I was in shock and kind of nerve. Asked to get out of the car and see. My wife and I both got out of the car and walked over to where I hit her. She wasn't there. We looked around, but there was no sign of anything. No blood, no body, just not. Hing. I know I wasn't going crazy. I saw her, and I felt as her body rolled over the top of my car. My wife assumed that I wasn't getting enough sleep, so she suggested that she finish the dive to Colorado. I agreed, and we got back into the car and drove off. Almost 2 hours later, I was listening to the radio, unable to sleep, as my wife was driving. The radio again turned to static, and our roads were suddenly foggy. I immediately felt that something was wrong and that something bad was about to happen. I couldn't really see anything but the road due to the fog, but I noticed someone standing in the middle of the road. Stop. I screamed. She stopped the car. The woman was just 10 feet ahead of us. It's her, I said. It's the woman I hit. I don't see anyone, she said, glaring out at the road. Somehow she couldn't see her, but I did. The woman was in a white gown, and she was probably in her 40s. I wasn't losing my mind like my wife thought I'd as the woman spoke, and what she said had me shivering in fear. Evil lies ahead. I looked at my wife. She was oblivious to what was going on. I didn't understand why she wasn't saying or hearing what I was, but I wish she had. Now more than ever, I tried to convince her that something bad was about to happen. I tried to convince her that someone was trying to warn us, but it was too late. We saw the headlights coming at the very last second. I woke up hours later in a dark room. The only source of light was coming from the small rectangular window that barely invited in the sunlight. It was clear that I was in a basement, but the question was where. The first thing I noticed was that my wife wasn't with me. I quickly jumped out of the bed. just to fall right to he floor. My right leg was gone. It was cut off from the knee down. It was then that I noticed how in pain I was. I screamed for my wife, fearing that something bad had happened to her. I lay helplessly on the floor until I heard the basement door creak open, followed by footsteps. I pressed my back against the basement wall, and I wait for what seemed like an eternity. "Mr. Edmund, you really should be in bed," a man said, helping me to the bed. He was wearing a lab coat, so I assumed he was a doctor. "Where is she?" I asked my wife. He put his hand on my forehead, noticing how high my temperature was. "You should calm down, Mr. Edmund. You're burning up." "I want to know where my wife is," I said. "I'm not calming down until I found out." He took off his glasses and put them in his pocket. "She's dead, Mr. Edmund," he said. "I'm sorry, but her injuries were too severe." I didn't want to believe it, but I had no choice but to. I thought about her as a memory. That's all she ever be now. I thought about the beautiful wedding we just had, how beautiful and happy she looked. She was dead, and I felt like the 4 years that we had known each other was all for nothing. "Where is she?" I asked, wiping the tears from my eyes. "She's at the morgue, about 30 minutes from here." "I want to see her," I said. "Mr. Edmund, you're not in the shape to go anywhere," he said. "Now eat up. I'm sure you're hungry." He put a plate on the nightstand. "I want to see her," I yelled before he walked away. He stopped and turned around. "You really shouldn't yell, Mr. Edmund," he said. "You just might wake the dead." He laughed before walking up the stairs. I got out of bed and hopped my way up the stairs just to find out that the door was locked. The guy was clearly hiding something, and I had to find out if it had anything to do with my wife. Hours later, as the day shifted into night, I was in bed thinking about my wife when I heard the door creak open. I heard no footsteps this time. I got out of bed and crawled my way to the stairs. I looked up, and I saw the door open, but nobody was there. I hopped up the stairs, and I walked through the door. I was in the living room, and it was strangely decorated with old furniture. It seemed as if I went back in time to the 60s. Something strange was going on, and I had no idea what it was. It got even more confusing when I noticed the picture that sat on the table stand. It was a family photo of the man with a young boy and a woman, who I assumed was his wife. It was the woman that I seen on the road. I don't know how it was possible, but it was her. I had a feeling that my wife was somewhere in the house, so I walked around to see if I could find her. I walked into the kitchen, and I noticed a trail of blood coming from the refrigerator. I walked slowly to the door, and I opened it. What I saw was just despicable, and it painted a picture in my mind that I would have to live for the rest of my life. There were limbs inside, cold, bloody limbs. I would never have known that they were the severed limbs of my wife if it weren't for the ring that I proposed to her with. I thought about the food I'd eaten earlier, and I instantly vomited. I knew there was something about that guy. Something seemed off. I heard the floor creak behind me, and I turned around to see Hat Fico fuck behind me, swinging a baseball bat that I couldn't dodge in time. I woke up hours later back in the basement. The pain I felt in my leg was unbearable. I couldn't move because my arms were strapped to the bed, and even if I could move, I'd fall flat to the floor. My left leg was gone. He cut off my other leg, and he was slowly killing me. My mouth was covered with duct tape so I couldn't scream even if I wanted to. Oh, good. You're awake. He was standing at my side, eating a piece of meat that I would assume was my leg. You want to know something? He asked me. You taste good. I was just imaging my hands wrap around his neck and slowly killing him. Haven't you ever wondered what you'd taste like? Well, I guess you probably already know. He ripped the tape off my mouth. I didn't even notice how painful it was. I'll fucking kill you was the first thing I said. I wasn't sure how I'd do it without any legs and being strapped to a bed, but murdering him in the most vicious way was all that I could think about. I've eaten many people in my life, Mr. Edmund, but I would say you take the cake. You're sick and you belong in hell. I'm already in hell, Mr. Edmund, he said with a creepy smile. I killed myself back in 1964. Right after I ate my wife and son. I didn't believe him, of course. I figure it was part of his sick mind. Why don't you just kill me? Get it over with. Well, Mr. Edmund, I learned that human flesh tastes a lot better fresh. So I'm gonna keep you alive for a while. He stood from his chair. Get some sleep, Mr. Edmund. I think you'll taste a lot better when you do. He walked up the stairs and closed the door. I was prepared to die. I'm honestly still surprised that I'm not now. There was a sudden knock at the door hours later, and I yelled as loud as I could, hoping they could hear me. A group of men then came running down the stairs, and they helped me out of the bed and out of that house. I was lucky that they spotted my car on the side of the road and followed the tracks that led them to the house. It was a miracle. I was surprised to find out that the house was actually abandoned and that nobody had lived there since a doctor by the name of James Conway had brutally murdered and eaten his wife and child before taking his own life. The severed pieces of my wife were found in the old refrigerator, and they weren't the only ones found. There were many people who were reported missing in the area that were never found over the last 50 years. Nobody believes me when I told and that it was James Conway who killed my wife and ate my legs. I guess they believe that a copycat killer was on the loose. There were more victims after me, and I'm sure there will be more in the future. I'll warn you, though, you're not safe in the northern parts of Colorado. If you see any warning signs, a woman in a white gown telling you that something evil is ahead, drive the opposite direction and never look back. Story 2. The Nurse in Black. I am Andrea Lewis, and I am a nurse. This is my story and how I came to care for my patient, Andrew. Andrew had always been different from the other children. His frail body and weak immune system were two factors in a life filled with sickness. Poor little Andrew's life consisted of his bedroom and home to a hospital bed. Due to his continuous illnesses, Andrew hated it. It made him feel helpless and weak. His right wrist was numb to IV needles, and it no longer fazed him when an ambulance was called to take him when he couldn't catch his breath while coughing. I hated seeing him in such a miserable state. Even though he wasn't my patient at first, I would pay him visits whenever I could, so he wouldn't be so lonely. He was a shy, quiet, and pleasant young man who loved to read. Whenever I would visit, he was always reading. He told me all about the stories he'd been reading, and it made me smile. I genuinely loved hearing him talk about his books and always looked forward to our little visits. The one day, which happened to be a rainy evening, I was about to enter high-S room. When I heard his assigned nurse yelling at him, Andrew was crying, and her screaming at him wasn't helping. I threw the door open, only to see this beastly woman slap Andrew across the face, telling him to shut up without thinking, acting on pure instinct to save the little boy who brought happiness into my dreary life. I picked up a syringe from the table nearby and lunged at this beastly woman, tackling her to the floor and injecting her with the contents of the syringe. Her struggling slowly stopped until she was finally unconscious, grabbing something to bind her hands and ankles, twine I think it was. I made sure that she was unable to get away. Then I went to comfort Andrew, who was shaking and crying uncontrollably. I hugged him tight, telling him that it would all be okay, and that I would never let her hurt him ever again. Amidst comforting him, I took my phone out from my skirt pocket, dialing 911. 911. "What is your emergency?" the operator asked. "Hello. My name is Andrea Lewis, and I'm a nurse at St. Matthew's Hospital," I replied, still holding Andrew close. "I would like to report child endangerment." "Oh, is the child with you, Miss Lewis?" the operator asked. "Yes, he is. He's in my arms," I reply. "Is the assailant near?" the operator asked. "Yes. She is. I knocked her out with sedatives and restrained her myself," I reply. "Oh, that's quite impressive, Miss Lewis." The operator laughed a little. "Which room and floor are you on?" "We have officers outside, 4th floor and our room 137, I reply. Seeing the officers outside, the door then burst open, scaring the daylights out of poor Andrew. He shrieked and hid his face in my neck, sobbing. I comforted him, held him close, and told him that the officers were going to help him, not hurt him. Andrew had told me that police officers scared him because of what they did to people. I told him that these officers were here, Becca. I called them to come and help. They're only here to help you, Andrew, love, I murmured, wiping his anxious tears away with my thumbs. Andrew nodded. Only tea. Lapsed into a particularly bad coughing fit. My instincts kicked in, and I quickly got him watered, his medicine, and a handful of tissues. Holding the tissues to his mouth, he coughed a few more times, then to carry them away from his mouth. They were stained red. Andrew's eyes went wide, and he looked like he was about to cry. I shushed him, helping him take his medicine, and drank some water. "It's all right now, darling," I murmured to him as the officers took the other nurse away. "Breathe, sweetie. It's all okay now." I rubbed his back, holding him close, hearing his breathing as slowly settled down. Before I knew it, he had fallen asleep. I smiled and laid him down against his pillows and tucked him in under his blanket. I kissed his forehead. "Sleep well, love. Pleasant dream. Several weeks later, it was a slow day, and I had just finished talking with Andrew about his new book. He was greatly improving, and he looked like he was feeling much better, much to my relief as I went into the records room to find his file. To update it, I was grabbed by one of the doctors, who shoved me against the door, locking it with his free hand. His breath smelled strongly of whiskey, and his eyes were hazy with lust. "Lovely little nurse," and he smirked, eyeing me up and down. "I have a little problem, and I need your help to fix it." "No way in hell," I shrieked, trying to push him off me. but he pinned my wrists above my head, smirking like a smug teenager. I'm not asking, and I'm telling. His smirk vanished, and he tore the front of my uniform open, exposing my breasts and leaving me too terrified to even scream for help. He threw me against the table. Did I struggle to get away, managing to get one hand free and scratch him across the face? He punched me in the stomach for that, and I gagged, having the wind knocked from me. Now, and the doctor hissed, getting in my face, just hold still and be a good girl for me. No, I hissed, spitting in his face. A look of disgust crossed his face. That's not very ladylike, little Miss Anne. For that he slapped me across the face. As too scared to move again, fearing that he would kill me. He was just about to remove my undergarments when the door suddenly burst open, and there was Andrew with a horrified look on his face. Andrew, get out of here, run, I screamed at him, receiving another punch to the stomach. Andrew's eyes went black with anger, and he grabbed a pair of scissors from the shelf, charging at T. He doctor, sinking the small yet sharp blades into his shoulder. Mind you that Andrew is only 10 and very small for his age due to his conditions. But this sudden burst of angry strength was mind-blowing. Andrew tackled the doctor to the floor with the scissors raised over his head. Leave Miss Anne alone, he screamed at the doctor as he sunk the scissors wherever he possible. Won't you touch her again? Don't come near her again. Stay away from her. I had never heard Andrew scream like this before. Sitting up, I managed to get off the table only to fall to the floor since my legs had no strength. The doctor let out one more desperate choked gasp of air, gave one last violent twitch, and finally went still. Andrew sounded like he was out to cry. Andrew, baby, did you? I trailed off, and the scissors fell from his little hands. I killed him. Andrew shrieked, gripping his head with his trembling hands. They'll take me to jail now. I don't want to go to jail, he wailed, sobbing uncontrollably. I crawled over to him and held him close, not caring if I got blood on my clothes. I won't let them take you, Bob. Why, I murmured, kissing the top of his head. You did this to protect me. That will count for something. Police sirens filled the air again, and the men burst through the door, finding me embracing Andrew, who was covered in blood, and the doctor, who was dead from several stab wounds. On the floor, the men spoke to both me and Andrew, and established his motive for killing the doctor was defense of another in an unlawful situation. No arrests were made, and different abuse facilities' phone numbers were left for us. I knew that this would only get worse, and that I needed to get Andrew out of her, for his safety. Once the night shift began, I snuck back into the hospital and into Andrew's room. Finding him asleep, I gently pat his hair, rousing him from his sleep. Miss Anne, he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. It's me, sweetie, I reply. I'm going to get you out of here and away from these bad people, okay? Andrew sat up, surprised, before looking down at his hands with a sad look on his face. What is it, honey? I asked, sitting down on his bed. He pointed at the envelope on the tray, beginning to whimper. I picked it up, pulled out several documents, and examined them. I recognized his mother's signature and realized that these were adoption forms. His mother had abandoned him, letting a complete stranger take him out of her life. Growing angry, I grabbed a pen and signed my name. If she didn't want him anymore, then I would gladly take little Andrew. I fell in love with this little boy, and I was determined to love him and take care of him. I slammed the signed papers onto the tray for everyone to see, helped Andrew remove his IV, and picked him up. After putting all his beloved books into a bag that I slung over my shoulder while I carried him out of the hospital, no one would ever be allowed to hurt my baby, and whoever dared to try, they would suffer a fate worse than death, and I would dish out that punishment. Asterisked 2 years later, asterisk, as one might have heard on the news, a child and his new adopted mother had vanished from the hospital several years ago and haven't been found. The birth mother off RS, no clues, and the birth father is long dead from a drug overdose. I didn't care. We have been fine these past 2 years, removing those who dared to harm or point accusatory fingers at my son. Todd, I will be Andrew's first kill. I have taught him how to defend himself, and he has learned very quickly and efficiently, spotting one girl from his class who went out of her way every goddamn day to make his life a living hell. I knew Andrew wanted revenge against her for making him have his issues with anxiety, self-esteem, and feeling like an outcast. As she walked by, I grabbed her by her blonde braided hair and tugged her into the darkened, dead-ended alley, kicking and screaming. I tossed her down with her head smacking against the brick wall behind her. "Who are you?" she yelled at me with scared tears in her blue eyes. "What do you want from me?" I smirked behind my surgical mask, turning to my left. "Andrew, baby, she's here," I called, and Andrew stepped up. Knife in hand, his blue-gray eyes were blank, but his demented smile said it all. He was happy to finally get his revenge against a girl who made his life a living hell. Quick slashes sent blood splattering everywhere, dripping off Andrew's face and hands as he stared at the bloody, mangled girl's remains. Turning to me with the happiest smile, he leapt into my open arms and I hugged him tight. "That was so much fun, Mama," he giggled, amidst a small cough. I smiled back, kissing his bloody cheeks and petting his blood-matted hair. "I'm so glad, baby," I replied. Spinning him around, he giggled loudly, tossing his head back. I couldn't help but laugh as well. I'm glad I had fallen in love with this sweet little boy all those years ago, and now I am glad to call him my baby. Story 3, Chernobyl, Tarnov. I am ascending the stairs. I have a reading on the floor above me. "Meet me up there," said Yuri. "Copy that. This is Anna. I have movement on that floor. 3 figures, about 1.2 meters in height. They could be Barkers. Use caution," said Serginsky. Yuri cautiously started up the metal staircase. The air was filled with a thick dust. They mingled with other particles of unknown nature. Despite his secured hazard gear, he could almost feel the air irritating his throat. He gripped his AK-47 once more to relieve some lingering anxiety. He flinched when the reading on his optics grew stronger. "There is gallo quartz here," he thought. "Good. We're not leaving empty-handed this time." Confirmed. They Barkers. They just shifted to the east wall, Anna reported. Her voice crackled over his earpiece. "I think ... to pups. And 1 alpha. I could take the pups, but the Alpha is going to be a problem, replied Yuri. I'm almost to the top of the east stairwell, said Tarnov. Copy that. I am at the west door, replied Yuri. I am scanning the floor, said Tarnov. Yes, there are barkers here, and something else, double quotes. Tarnov's scanner showed the 3 barkers in the center of the large floor, his scanner also picked up 2 figures that seemed more human. Serginsky, are there any records of humanoid mutations? Hold on, there are some bits of information, but nothing solid. Just some surveillance photos of what one team assumed were drifters, replied Serginsky. I don't think those were drifters, Yuri uttered under his breath. Why do you say that? Asked Tarnov. Because they were alive long enough for someone to take 1 or more photos of TH. And Yuri stopped when he heard locks shuffling from inside the room, then a series of loud footsteps of what sounded similar to a large animal. Just then something big stood by the door. He could hear something sniffing the air through the threshold. Yuri quietly held his breath. The other teammates could see what he was seeing via their sensed optics. They all went silent on the radios as not to alert the barker. These creatures had really good hearing, so good that they could hear the chatter over the radios. Teams have recorded them hearing radio chatter a maximum distance of 5 to 15 feet, RS, and actual physical communications at a maximum distance of 1 to 3 miles. These beasts measured a little over a meter in height and were a mutated derivative of Canis and Canis lupus familiaris. IOU's changes are that they can now stand on their hind legs, increase in size as well as ferocity. They do tend to travel in a pack manner, as well as hints of increased intelligence, but thus he have never been confirmed. Hannah could see the dust being trashed about on her optics, the threshold that Yuri that now stood in front of. She trained her rifle on a 3rd-floor window near where the other 2 barkers were standing, flipping a switch. On her rifle, she activated a high-power LED light, setting it to flash. Repeat. She was able to catch the attention of the 2 barkers. The Alpha gave out a low howl, catching the attention of the one near Yuri. It turned back towards its pack mates and ran back to join them. The loud thunder of it running from one point to another shook the floor, startling Yuri and Tarnov. They all then grouped at the window where the light was coming through. Nobody knew what about the light was so mesmerizing. Some likened it to how cats see lit, red dots, but still all it was speculation. We almost lost you, Tarnov said with a chuckle. God knows that the door wasn't going to mean anything to that fucker, replied Yuri. I have them at the main window, facing the courtyard, said Anna. You should be able to go in and grab the quartz. Copy that. Switching to silent, said Yuri. Tarnov, use suppressors. Be careful when engaging the humanoids. If they have enough time, they will alert the barkers. And no newfangled light is going to turn their heads, said Serginsky. Yuri shouldered his rifle and brought out his sidearm. He attached a suppressor and held a knife alongside his pistol. Okay, we're entering, said Yuri. He slowly turned the lock. A quick gust of wind pushed a cloud of dust into his face mask as he entered. His visor was slightly fogged over as the door fully opened. He came out into a maze of ales. Each ale had tall metal shelves with various sizes of boxes. He switched on his night vision, and after a visual okay from Tarnov via their optics, they proceeded into the maze. Their main objective was to retrieve the Gallo quartz, a rare crystal quartz that was mined near Chernobyl prior to the Chernobyl incident. Evidence is sketchy, but some have connected the incident to the discovery of the Gallo quartz. Some months after it was mined, strange things began to happen in and around Chernobyl. Pets went missing, livestock turned up mangled, torn apart, or mutilated in some way. On a smaller scale, but still equally valid, certain social conflicts between parties in Chernobyl were resolved. These events were around the same time, with the first missing reports less than a week or so before the conflicts resolved themselves. Yuri was barely a glimmer in his mother's eye when the reactor exploded. His parents were both from Minsk, but his father's brother and Yuri's uncle had worked as a scientist at the Chernobyl reactor. He had known him when he was a child, but growing older he saw less and less of him. The last thing he remembers is the short tale that he was told before he left. In the month of January 1986, a mining crew dogging up ground for a new urban town center came upon a deposit of dark-colored crystal quartz that they had never seen before. Bringing back a sample for testing, they soon discovered the crystal was able to interfere with communications as well as set off dogs and most other animals. It was reported that a guard's dog became so scared at the sight of just a small chunk of it, it let out a series of worried whines and then scrambled free of his master's leash and ran off. The dog was never seen again. In the following months, his uncle began to talk a lot less about the work he did. In March, when he and a select group of workers were allowed to go on vacation, he never came. Yuri sat silently at dinner that night, disappointed that there would be no scary story from his uncle. There would instead be stories from Yuri. This thought rushed to the back of his mind as he traversed the storage room. He stopped by a gap in the boxes where he came face to face with Tarnov. He made a peace sign, silently stating there are 2 humanoids nearby. These specific mutations were the result of random people getting too close to the crystal without proper protective gear. Drifters sometimes wander into the exclusion zone, and those that run afoul of barkers or an undiscovered deposit of Gallo quartz are never seen again. At least not as they were. Tarnov and Yuri were on opposite sides of a row of shelves. Ahead of them the 2 humanoids stood guard. These humanoids, as they were labeled, acted primarily as guard dogs for the barkers, while they were BL. They had amazing hearing. If they heard something that seemed threatening, they would let out a loud shriek. This would attract any barkers in the immediate area, and God help the person who can't run faster than the barkers. Tarnov nodded towards Yuri. Yuri responded with a raised fist. Tarnov then made his way towards the first humanoid. Turning a corner, he raised his G and then pulled the trigger. A bullet was fired, punching through the creature's head, quietly neutralizing it. He caught the body in his arms before it hit the ground. Any second later, and one standing not 6 feet away would have been alerted. Yuri soon came from the other aisle. Turning quickly, he shot and killed the last one. Following protocol, Ita grabbed the body and gently brought it down as not to make any noise. Yuri checked his scanner. The crystals were close. The readings on his scanner were at times stronger than they were when he was in the stairwell. He and Tarnov surveyed the storage room for any bare-standing crystals or unusual-looking boxes, but everything seemed normal. save for the three barkers distracted by a bright blue flashing light. If I was a Soviet scientist from the 80s, thought Yuri, where would I hide the important stuff? Yuri caught sight of a large steel box among a pile of corrugated metal and random tools. He pointed Ernov towards the box. They both made their way over to a shelf with a large steel lockbox nestled on the lower rack. His scanner started reading red. This was it, the samples that they had been looking for. Well, we're not losing our minds yet, so this gallo quartz hasn't been activated yet, thankfully. Thought Yuri. Tarnov went into his shoulder pack and brought out a small needle. He slid the needle into both of the locks and filled them with acid. The mechanisms on the locks dissolved, allowing them access. Upon opening the box, they found a solid chunk of gallo quartz. This was a not giving off any negative effects, so this had to be unaffected by the incident. Yuri took the chunk and locked it away in a secure container, protected from residual radiation and hurting anything or anyone. Yuri and Tarnov both made their way back towards the south stairwell, chunk of gallo in tow. This is Tarnov. We descending the south stairwell. We have the sample. Copy that. We're bringing the carrier around the block. We are 30 seconds out. Be out there when we pull up. Serginsky reply. Hard copy. You guys might at to hurry it up. Double quotes said Anna over the radios. Why? What's happening? Asked Yuri. My light just died. And they just found the bodies. She replied. Shit, blurted Tarnov. They both bolted down the last flight of stairs. When they reached ground floor, a loud crash came from the third floor entrance. A howl emanated from the top of the stairs. It sent chills down Yuri's spine. It sounded so similar to a wolf's howl, yet there was something about it that was wholly alien. The exit was in sight. Tarnov and Yuri both rushed outside and into the moonlit night. The stars were out bright tonight, a stark contrast to the latent miniature necropolis below. As they got outside, Yuri turned to see the moonlight shining down the hallway into the stairwell. It was there that the Alpha Barker stood, tall and ready to strike at a moment's notice. Whatever the crystals had done, it had truly changed the once noble animal into a beast of seemingly otherworldly nature. Its fur had fallen off, leaving only patches. Its eyes were a solid red, and there were small deposits of gallo quartz growing out of its body. Its eyes were a solid color, but he could see them bearing him down. The beast then reared up and charged down the hallway. Just then the carrier rounded the corner. It came to a screeching halt. The back opened up, and Tarnov and Yuri both practically fell inside. The tears on the carrier screeched loudly as they sped off. The Barkers in close pursuit. Story 4. The story of Thomas Hughes. Thomas Hughes was a boy of few words. Few people knew more than the obvious about Thomas's life. He was a lonely child, and he had never known his parents. The story goes that they were killed when he was still very young, and he was subsequently placed into the permanent care of his grandmother. His grandmother was not only his closest friend, but his only friend. So, when she passed away, he concealed himself in a way the residents of his small town were previously unfamiliar with. He stopped coming to school, stopped caring for himself, and the only time he left his home was to visit his grandmother in the town cemetery. Every day Thomas would walk the few blocks from his home in which he unknown, of course, to the town authorities, lived all alone. On one particularly gloomy afternoon, Thomas was on his way to the cemetery. He carried with him a bundle of crumbling flowers he had scavenged from the heap of dirt that was once his grandmother's garden. His grandmother was not buried. However, her final resting place was in the large mausoleum located in the center of the cemetery. Thomas walked through the seemingly endless rows of tombstones and crypts until he at last reached the mausoleum. After entering, Thomas noticed something strange about the temperature inside. "It is rather cold in here today," he thought to himself. But this did not bother Thomas, as he was soon on his way once more to see his grandmother. He knelt down and placed his hand onto the cool stone upon which his grandmother's name was inscribed. Thomas was just beginning to put the flowers down when he heard a soft sob coming from the adjacent side of the mausoleum. He stood and slowly turned his attention towards the source. He saw in the dim lighting a woman, no older than 30, standing softly weeping into the veil of her extravagant gown. Thomas was at first unfazed. "How sad," he thought. "Maybe I can help her." He started toward the woman, but suddenly stopped. Thomas thought to himself that this woman seemed to be very behind the times. Her dress was noticeably old, and her hair was done in such a manner that she appeared to have been plucked straight from a story his grandmother would have told him about her glory days. Despite this, Thomas felt sad for the woman and decided he would approach her. He walked across the leaf and cobweb-ridden halls of the place and was soon no less than 5 feet from the base of the woman's dress. Hesitantly, Thomas said to the woman, "Excuse me, ma'am, but I noticed you seemed sad. Is everything all right?" The woman did not answer. "I'm here visiting my grandmother." Thomas looked across the hall and pointed. Right over there. The woman still did not answer, silent other than her somber weeping. Thomas felt as if he were bothering the woman, and apologized. "I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am. I'll be going now." Thomas began to turn away from the woman, but realized he still held the dying flowers in his hand. "I've got some flowers, if you'd like them." Suddenly the woman turned to him, her cries stopping abruptly. Thomas was startled and dropped the flowers onto the ground. She looked at Thomas, her eyes piercing his. Suddenly Thomas felt himself becoming very, very upset. The sheer look of the woman's face made Thomas sorry for her. He grabbed the almost completely destroyed flowers off of the ground and looked back up at her. "Are those flowers for me?" the woman asked in an innocent manner. Yes," Thomas replied. "I thought maybe they could help you feel less sad." The woman smiled at Thomas, and Thomas smiled back at her. She reached out and took the flowers from his hand. He noticed even through her lace gloves that her hands were clammy and cold. She smelled beautifully, as if she had doused herself in rose-scented perfume. Through watery eyes, the woman said to him, "Thank you, you're very kind." Thomas insisted that it was his pleasure. The woman asked Thomas his name, and he replied honestly. "Do you live around here?" Thomas asked. She smiled and, turning towards the wall of the tomb, said, "Yes, I live very close." Thomas nodded and was beginning to feel uneasy. "What is your name?" he asked. She quickly replied, Anne Patterson. "But most people call me Annie." "Well, Annie," Thomas said, "I really must be going now." "Wait." she said. Thomas turned back to her. "What is it?" he asked. "Will you do something for me?" said the woman. Thomas didn't want to seem rude, so he told the woman he would do her a favor. She beamed with excitement. "I need you to bring me something. It's for my husband." "Sure," he said. "What is it?" "I need you to bring me a candlestick. My husband should be coming soon, and I need him to know where I am. This old place gets dark at night, you know." Slightly startled by the woman's bizarre request, he said, "Okay, I'll bring you a candlestick. But wouldn't you rather just use a flashlight? It'd be much easier." The woman was already turned around and did not respond to Thomas. Thomas decided he would head home. On the way back, he told himself he would get a candlestick for the woman from his house and bring it to her the next day, and he visited his grandmother. The following day was no less rainy and gray than the previous. Thomas now had the candlestick in hand, along with more flowers for his grandmother. He walked up to the door of the mausoleum and noticed that this time it was even colder than the last. The wonderful smell of the woman was gone, and the entire place smelled of death and rotting flesh. The leaves on the ground were still, and there was no breeze, just the cold air and the repulsive stench lingering the halls. Thomas walked towards where the woman was standing the day before, but found the halls to be empty. "Annie," he called. There was no answer. Thomas set down the candlestick and started towards his grandmother's location. He placed the flowers down onto his grandmother's marker. Suddenly a click and a slam broke the silence of the place, and Thomas ran towards the door. It was locked. Thomas shook the door with all of his might, but it was to no prevail. He let go of the heavy handles and faced the blackness of the mausoleum. Thomas could not see more than 3 feet in front of him. As the open door provided the only light, he began to walk forward in the darkness, arms outstretched and eyes wide open, hoping to find something that could help him open the door. Thomas remembered that he had left the candlestick sitting on the floor near where the woman was standing, and he knew he could use that to help him find a way out. Thomas walked. He did not know where he was going and knew nothing of what could be lurking in the darkness. Suddenly Thomas felt a sweep of air blow past him. It pushed the burning stench of death even closer to his nostrils. A hand touched Thomas on the shoulder. Thomas jumped and turned to face the direction of the hand. He saw nothing but darkness. He was very frightened now. Thomas had the nagging sensation that someone or something was watching him through the shadows. He began to run, and eventually found himself where he had placed the candlestick on the ground. He ran his fingers along the dirty marble floor where he was sure he had placed it, but found nothing. Thomas backed himself into the corner of the hallway and found himself leaning against the ending wall, facing what he knew to be a long hallway lined with graves. Thomas was absolutely terrified. Never in his life had he felt so helpless and alone. He squinted towards the end of the hall. Out of nowhere there was a light, barely distinguishable. It was slowly growing larger, and Thomas realized what it was he was seeing. It must be the candlestick, he thought. It appeared to be floating at chest level, moving at such a slow pace it made Thomas incredibly uneasy. He was sure now that this was the candlestick. Who could be holding it, he thought. To himself, the candle was now within 20 yards of him. Before he could react, there was a scratching noise to his right. It was coming from inside one of the tombs. Within seconds, the entire mausoleum was filled with intense scratching, as if the dead were so desperate for life they would have clawed themselves out of the thick stone walls. The candle was now only 10 yards away. Thomas covered his ears and closed his eyes as tight as he could. He waited for what seemed like hours, and the scratching finally stopped. Thomas slowly uncovered his face and looked into the darkness. Once more the lit candlestick was sitting on the floor directly in front of him. He reached out and grabbed it. Thomas stood up, and illuminated by the light of the candle was Annie's face, staring at him and blinking with a horrible smile. Only this time it was not the same Annie. This Annie's face was rotting. Her eyes were only hollow sockets, blooded and ghastly. Her teeth were falling out, and her hair was black and stringy. Thomas stared back into what used to be her piercing eyes and whispered out of pure terror, "Annie." At this, she let out a low, odd, curdling shriek that sent chills through Thomas's body. He dropped the candlestick and ran as fast as he could towards where he thought the door was. He slammed into the cold metal frame and burst into the brisk night air. He began to spread through the cemetery, finally reaching the large cast-iron gates at the end of the path. Thomas flung them open and turned around quickly to slam them shut behind him. He did so and grabbed a stick to shove through the handles. He stood there for a moment, tear shock and dread still filling his veins. He heard Annie's terrible wail from inside the mausoleum in the distance. No, it was growing closer. Thomas saw a figure at the end of the path, moving alarmingly fast. It was Annie. She was flying towards him, still wailing. Her feet did not touch the ground, and her gown rippled behind her as she hurtled towards the exit. Thomas jumped back, and when he looked back up, she was no longer at the gate. He stood, and when he turned around to continue on his way home, he was once more facing the empty sockets of the weeping phantom. To this day, there is only speculation as to what really happened to Thomas Hughes that night. The police found Thomas's lifeless body the next day inside of the mausoleum, leaning against the gravestone of Ann Patterson. Next to hers was the grave of her husband. Thomas's lifeless eyes were wide, staring blankly into the walls of the tombs. His mouth was agape in a twisted look of terror and death. In one hand he clutched on to the bouquet of flowers he gave to Annie, and in the other was the candlestick. Legend has it that anyone who enters the mausoleum after dark will face the same horrible fate as Thomas Hughes. Story 5. Down the pit. He knew it was there but couldn't see it. The basement wasn't wired for electricity yet and was completely dark save for the light from the stairs leading up to the kitchen. With the boxes in his arms blocking his view, Bill shuffled along the basement floor feeling for the pit. Or was it the house was over 100 years old, and he couldn't be sure what the hole in the dirt floor was originally used for. He only knew it was in the middle of the basement, hewn out of ancient dirt, and about 2 feet wide, the perfect size for the wayward foot or ankle. Remembering this, he stopped and tripped on himself abruptly as his toes teetered over the edge. "Christ, I almost didn't see that," he murmured to himself as an errant fork and butter knife went flying, clanging, along the floor and into the abyss of He pit. He didn't hear the items hit ground. "Do we need any more dishes out of this one?" he yelled up, setting the box down beside the abyss. "Just the cutlery set and mugs, babe. Thanks. Ascending the stairs, he admitted, fork and knife are Mia. Lost them in a battle with the basement. Down that big fucking hole, sorry. One night and the house is already winning. Great, Jean responded cynically as they went to bed that night. Gil made a mental note to call a contractor about closing up the pit. Creaks and groans from the old house aside, the couple felt good about the new move and fell asleep peacefully on the blow-up mattress upstairs. In the next few days, several contractors came in and out, the couple finally settling with a local Joe, unable to stay and babysit the contractor. John and Gil left him the keys, hoping to come home to some progress that evening after work. Instead, they came home to an absolute mess. Damp, uneven pools of concrete were scattered throughout the basement, along with some cracked wooden planking. Of course, the pit lay untouched. Damp cement spread in wide semicircles around it. Angry, Gil called Jean down, and they all looked at the terrible job with the industrial flashlight. After leaving several angry voicemails, a date to no response, they gave up on Joe Contractor for the day. However, a week later they had still not heard from their contractor. They assumed they got swindled, and they were unsettled to know he still had their house keys. Once they realized nothing had been stolen from their home, they took their lumps and lost deposit and had the locks changed on their doors. They decided on another renovation project, giving up on the basement for the time being. That night, Jean lay snoring and Gil was awake, restless. His slightest movements bobbed the blow-up mattress and woke Jean, so he decided to get up and watch some TV downstairs. Gil sifted through the stuff, ticked to find some infomercials that would make him drowsy. Around 1 a.m., he heard a scuffling in the basement. It sounded like boxes shifting on earth. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he turned the -1 off and listened the last shuffle, and then silence. The empty echo bounced around in his head, and he immediately became suspicious. What if the contractor had been down there hiding the whole time? Washington, is it to steal their property, or for some more sinister purpose? Determined, Gil grabbed the industrial flashlight in his left hand, swung opened the basement door, and descended the stairs, picking up a baseball bat just removed from storage in his right. Descending into the dark, Gil waited a moment for his eyes to adjust on the middle stair. The smell of damp earth filled his nostrils. Hazing the bat in his right hand, he also lifted the flashlight in his left as he tried to scan the basement without going further. Realizing he must continue, he slowly forged on, and as his foot met the floor crash, a box seemingly fell over on its own and its contents slammed on the ground. Rolling near the pit, what had caused all that movement? And that sound, that snaking whisper, had to be from various objects, from the box falling, bouncing, and echoing deep down into the abyss. A round, small shape with dimpled, tough skin seemed to descend or jump into the darkness of the hole. Did his old black basketball fall down into the pit? He remembered he had a throwback orange basketball, not a black one. It had to be one of Jen's things, now lost forever. After rooting through the remainder of the box and searching the space for animals, Gil walked back toward the stairs and felt a distinct crunch underfoot. He lifted his slipper heel to find a broken picture frame. He and Jean smiled up from the photo but the scribble left in the now dry cement beside it was foreboding. The print, or was it an animal track, was smaller than a human hand and excessively thin. It seemed etched in like a signature made in wet cement. The fingers weren't straight, but crooked and measured about 3 inches long. Each finger ended in a sharpened point. How had they missed this before? How had they been made in dry cement? He hastily threw a few of the broken boards over the opening and ran upstairs. He couldn't bring himself to look down inside the hole that night, and he couldn't tell Jean that either. So he ignored the incident altogether. A few days later, Jean had to do laundry in the basement. Basket in her arms, she tried to get her task done as quickly as possible. The basement freaked her out and was starting to smell terrible. Returning to the first floor, she casually remarked, "Gil, it smells like death down there. We really had to get that damn thing sealed up. I know. It's probably time to get serious about covering it again. Did you see those weird markings in the cement? I can't tell if it's an animal that got in or—" Gil froze. "Markings? There's more than one, yeah, like jagged, pointy sticks. You knew about it. Go check it out. I don't remember them being there before." Even during the day it was dark and cavernous. Again, Gil descended, his cell phone light dimly lighting the path in front of him until there was the new print. It was a good 2 feet away from the first stage he saw last night, and closer to the stairs that led to the first floor. 3 pointed edges of each indent this time were clawed deeper into the cement somehow. It had been dry for weeks now. This time he knew he had to look inside. The boards had already been removed from the opening and cast aside. He doubted that Jean had gotten close enough to do this due to the terrible smell. He took a few pictures of each print on his phone and held it out for light, avoiding the boxes and boards while slowly walking towards the hole in the ground. On the edge, he took a deep breath and peered over. Nothing was there, just a dark hole in the ground. He listened for a moment and heard only eerie silence. He snapped a photo of it anyway with a bright flash for reference, and stood back, up and returned to daylight. That night they lay on the mattress, a general ominous feeling settling over the two. Jean was vaguely uncomfortable with the shuffling sounds emanating from the basement, but Gil had a growing apprehension and fear. "Let me see those pictures again, Gil. It has to be some animal, like a possum or something, that's making those noises, and they supposed to smell awful like that." He took out his phone in reply and sorted through his images until he came across the 3 shots he had taken earlier. The first was the print nearest the stairs. Its gnarled fingers ended in points somehow cast deeper in the cement than the rest of it, almost like an ominous threat. The second photo was nearly identical, though more benign as it was further away. Gil flicked to the third photo, which he hadn't shown her yet. It was a photo dominated by dark, blurred edges. Flecks of light from the flash reacted with the dust motes in the swirling air. Gold and white snowflakes in a coal mine. Nothing could really be made out distinctly in the shot. Tired, Gil grabbed the phone back. John refused to let go of her grip. "What's that in the corner? How?" Gil frowned and held the phone closer. In the very corner of the photo, a midnight black, round object had the red dots in the center of it. At first sight it looked like flecks of rust-colored dust, but as Gil enlarged the photo, you could see the lights belonged to the shape in the darkness, somehow discernible as more dark than the pit shadows itself. They were paired feral, white closed together in the middle of the black mass as basement turned to distinguished movements. Large boxes were being overthrown as if they weighed nothing, their contents clacking and banging along the MP earth. They turned to each other, unsure if they should head off whatever creature was downstairs or just run. Just stay up here and I'll check it out. No fucking way, Gil. We need to get the fuck out of this house. This is bullshit. We just moved in and I can't believe. Shut up. Take the bat and go out the front door. Lines, check it out. It's only in the basement. If I don't come out in 5, call animal control. It will be fine. It's just an animal trapped in there, though. By this time, Gil was unsure what kind of creature he would meet. As soon as their feet touched the floorboards, the basement shuffling ceased. Heightened, the couple tiptoed downstairs, floorboards anxiously creaking as Jeanne reached the front door, hurried out and hugged herself on the front lawn, grabbing a knife from the cutlery set and the industrial flashlight in the kitchen. Gil stood in front of the closed basement door in silence. He put his ear against the flimsy door and listened. Just more silence. The temporary tease of the moment lulled him. Stepping back, he whirled open the door and shined his light on the stairs. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. 5 minutes passed, and no Gil. Jeanne started to panic, and after 5 more, she called 911. A team arrived promptly and went inside the house, unable to understand her fear. After another 10 minutes, 2 policemen emerged. "Ma'am, please just come with us," intoned 2 officers as they closed in to block her path into the house. Crashing through them, Jeanne rushed in, determined to see. She snaked through the hallway and then into the kitchen. She stops abruptly and slips on a sticky substance. It's as if someone had thrown a full water balloon where the kitchen floor meets the stairs, but it's a deep maroon red splatter saturating the floor and walls. A screech tears from Jen's throat as she looks up and sees dozens of twisted, deformed, red prints strewn across the ceiling. They emerge from the basement ceiling and exit out the open back door into the night. Story 6, the quiet sky. It started when we called out to the stars. Into the darkness, we felt so small, tumbling through via Saint emptiness, or clinging to the skin of the world, and without a single reason why. We were curious, yes, but ultimately I think we were just terribly frightened, and we were young, so very young. We were children, and like a lonely, lost child, we did the only thing we could think of to make it stop. We did what we thought we had to do to make the universe make sense. We called for help. For years we scanned the sky for a sign. We sent signals to the stars in the darkness beyond. Are we alone? But the skies were quiet, always so quiet, leaving us to our own makings. But crying children never cease, and neither did we. We sent calls into every corner of space for decade after decade. We refused to believe no one was out there. They had to be, yet, for some unknown reason, they never answered us. Everyone remembers when that changed. They think it responded to the Arecibo message from 1974. The response to the Arecibo message was received almost 3 months ago. Into separate parts, the first part of the message was received at the Het Creek Radio Observatory in California. The Allen telescope array picked up what sounded like static interference that continued on for over an hour. It consisted of unintelligible screeching and buzzing sounds that continued without pause for the whole hour. The meaning of this message was never discovered, if it had one. The only thing we knew was that the SIGNAL's origin came somewhere in the Hercules constellation near Messier 13. As soon as that signal stopped, the real message began. We made contact that day, and we were asked a question: who is there? It came not through the radios, but as a voice inside all of our heads asked the question to all of us. I heard it, my wife heard it, the young heard it, and the old heard it. Even the deaf heard it. Everyone, everywhere, heard this voice whisper that question in their heads. In every language on earth, I remember it almost too clearly. It asked in that familiar yet indescribable voice that's always there in my mind. It was like one of my own thoughts had gone rogue and had decided to speak directly to me. The world seemed to stop as everyone listened for what came next. Where are you? The heavy question seemed to linger in our minds for hours afterwards, and then for days, and then for weeks. That day changed everything. There were the doubters from the very beginning, and the holy ones who claimed that God had spoken to all of us, and that the time to repent was now. There were those who claimed they'd heard nothing, and those who'd claimed that the aliens had given them their own secret messages. And, of course, there were those who truly believed that we had been contacted for the first time by an extraterrestrial race like us, one ready to communicate, ready to lead us out of the dark. We were wrong. We never made contact with alien life, at least nothing comprehensible or discernible to human understanding. The stars are vast, and in their vastness our voices had touched the ears of something truly incomprehensible, something hungry and malevolent. The voice. We realized our mistake when the ground started to groan beneath our feet. Everywhere the ground seemed to moan. The muffled sounds shook through the dust and dirt below us. No one knew what was causing it, at least not until the calls started coming in. The graveyards were screaming. All at once the dead had started screaming. Every deceased man, woman, and child was turning in their graves. All the animals did so too. Every dog, every cat, everything that had ever walked this earth. The cries of ancient whales shook the seas, and the shrill screeching of birds echoed in the forests. The caskets shook, and the morgues howled. The voices stopped together in an instant, leaving the world in an amplified silence. In their absence, a new sound filled the air. The voice returned. I hear you. It came as a whisper from behind. An ominous, yet oddly playful presence that felt so close, but was truly still so far away. It let us breathe in the silence for a minute before it made us a promise. It was a promise we all knew to be true. I am coming. The voice was gone, and the air was again filled with screams. This time they were from the living. After the voice had gone, we were left to our own devices. Millions panicked, and rightfully so, as chaos took hold of the streets many would die in. The violence and the gunfire of that night, they would be known as the raptured before long, and The rest of us were the condemned. We could only wait. The screaming dead was only the first of the side effects that we felt as the voice approached. The closer it got, the more we felt it. That first night, after the screaming, we noticed the stars bleed for the first time. A sector of the western sky had turned black, blacker than the night. It was only truly visible because of the ring of stars around it. The light from those stars had turned red, and they seemed to bleed across the sky like food coloring dropped into water. Their light swirled and flowed all around the edge of some unseen mass. I knew then that I was staring into the face of the voice. Our scientists claimed that nothing was there, and that their radar and scans always came up empty. Their telescopes could see nothing but darkness in that section of space. However, the proof Washington's right in front of us as every night that ring of darkness got wider and more stars bled in the sky. We watched it come. As each night passed, the black spot would widen and more stars would distort and bleed around it. During the day, a new hell would greet us. The side effects worsened. The day always brought something new. I'm sure most of what happened will go untold and unknown. The animals started disappearing, all of them. No tracks, traces, or bodies were left behind. Pets would run away, some violently so. They all retreated, never to be seen again. The forests were left off, and the oceans empty. The air was left silent. The world left seemed empty and lonely. They left like water receding from the shore just before the tsunami breaks. One day, about 2 weeks ago, scientists tried to talk to the voice again. They hoped, perhaps, to reason with it. They told it about what was happening on our world and asked it questions. The scientists begged it yet speak. When asked what the voice sent a response. The next night the skies lit up with streaks of fire. It was a light for hours, blazing with orange and red. We didn't realize the effects until the next day, when the televisions turned to static and the telephones refused to work. We had sat watching as all the satellites were knocked out of the heavens. After that, reports became rumors and rumblings. Sanity, a thing of the past. The air chilled and weighed us down. The voice was nearly here, and everyone felt it. It rained for a week after the satellites fell. The rain was salty and mired with an unknown filth that turned the grass black. Maybe the satellites tracked something back in with them when they hit the sky. No one knew for sure. All we know is that it fell from clouds black as charcoal that blotted out the sun. Like liquid ash, darkness fell upon us for days. When the clouds went away, the skies were empty. There were no clouds, yet the sky, low and gray. If the sun was anywhere in the sky, it never made itself known. Even it had abandoned us. Each day grew slowly darker and darker until night and day became almost the same. Some people would claim later that they'd seen things in the dark. Creatures with gangly limbs and crooked faces lurking in the corner of their vision. They were tall, white creatures that looked molted or rotten through their transparent skin. Appearances would last for just a second or two before vanishing without a trace. Some believed this was the first step in the aliens' invasion, but the rest of us didn't know what to think. We just knew that it was nothing that simple or benign. They must have been hallucinations, just more madness to endure. But ultimately as harmful as anything else, as harmless as the screams of the dead, the missing animals, and the dying sky. Appearances slowly increased in duration and number. I think everyone saw them once at the Lees' tea, but I don't think a single person would ever guess why they were truly here. They never touched nor spoke to anyone, and they certainly never harmed anyone. Most who got good looks at them described them as mournful or sorrowful looking. Some even claim the creatures watched over them at night, and others even claim that it seemed as if the creatures were sorry for them. One CL aimed to have even seen one prostrate upon the ground, hands clasped above its head. He said it was praying for us. Prayer was no help. The churches and places of worship that had divided us for so long failed to bring hope to any in the end. The voice let them pray and beg for a while, but just days ago the voice ended it all. No one questioned how, for at this point nothing that happened surprised anyone anymore. But on the final day, all books of worship burned, every last Bible, every Quran, everything. People rushed to their centers of faith, but found no solace. The church, and temples had suffered the same fates. If not worse, the people were left abandoned by their greatest hopes. There were rumors of churches all over the world with walls formed from bodies of those who sought refuge. They were merged to the walls, stuck to them like flies in a trap. They died still pleading for hope, but they were beyond God's help. The rest of us had learned to stop begging. We waited. The final message came. From beyond the sky it fell upon us. The voice echoed, and it spoke the simple truth. I am here. The is a darkness beyond the horizon, the likes of which I doubt has ever been seen. It brings with it the screams of countless souls, and it moves fast. The stars are dying now, and I know they'll never be seen again. The light is dying so fast. I leave this not as a warning. No, it's far too late for that. Instead, consider this the last realization, the last humanity will ever know, for we used to wonder whether or not we were alone and lost, but never whether or not we were safe and hidden. The universe is infinite, and our understanding was significantly more finite. We should never have beckoned to the darkness. Instead, we should have clung to the light and closed our eyes every time we were turned to the void. As the final minutes approach, I hold one final truth to be certain. I now know why the skies were always so quiet. Story 7. Death. Light blinds my eyes after what seemed to be a century of darkness. I stood on an unfamiliar highway. I had no idea where I was or how I got there, but I was there now. A man stood in front of me, dressed in a collared shirt and khaki shorts. He seemed to be in his early 20s. Where am I? I asked the man, trying to call back memories of what I was doing. Before the darkness, the man looked at me, his expression serious, but with a light smile. Doesn't matter, my friend. All that does is that you're here. I think you'll find that your memories will return soon. Happens to most people when they die, so. I'm dead, I asked, unable to hide the fear and sadness in my voice. The man jumped, as if surprised by the conclusion that I had drawn. No, oh God, no. That would really mess up the plan. Now, wouldn't it? I'm sorry about the vagueness, but I would rather explain things after you're up to speed. Up to speed? What are you talking about? I felt my mind seem to bend, and suddenly I remembered the bridge. The dog that jumped out of the window of the car in front of me, the guardrail, braking as my minivan swerved to avoid the dog, sending me falling into the waters below, the water filling my lungs as I struggled to get out of the car. Then the darkness. Wait, what happened after died? I asked the man, confused. Well, let's say you were one of the chosen few. You see, when someone dies and is brought back via resuscitation or whatever other ways man has to restore life, there is a sort of system. It's all planned. Men have taken to painting a portrait of death, the hooded skeletal creature with the big sharp scythe. Think of it more like a force. There is no way to control it, and what it chooses happens, one way or another. There is no reason, no cause, but it must happen. Why are you telling me this? And who are you anyway? Who I am is of no meaning. You are the one that matters here, but if it will calm your nerves, my name was Dennis. Why I am telling you these things you will find out soon. I looked around at the rather busy highway. Several cars sped past where we stood on the side of the road, not paying us any attention whatsoever. I looked far down the road and saw a red truck coming. A long trailer was hitched to the back, filled with what seemed to be thin metal pipes. About 5 cars ahead of the truck, a pickup truck passed me, throwing out a bottle of beer as it went. The bottle shattered as it hit the blacktop, leaving jagged glass strewn on the road. It was too late to pick it up, but most of the cars seemed to see it and swerved around it. The true CK came, and although it attempted to pass the bottle's remains, the wheels on the right side of the vehicle spun over the glass, popping one tire at least. The truck swerved, and the driver slammed on the brakes. The gate of the trailer must have not been secured correctly, for it fell open, and several pipes fell out at a rather high speed. I looked on in horror as a car behind the truck attempted to stop, but by then it was too late. The car slowed to a sickening stop exactly in front of me as I looked at the terrible fate of the poor driver. One of the fallen pipes had shed through his windshield, impaling him. I stared in horror for some time, not sure how to react. I rushed to the man, but I knew there was nothing I could do. He began to choke on his own blood as it trickled slowly down his chin. The window was down, so I reached into the car to see if I could at least unfasten his seatbelt. It was impossible, and upon realizing this, I stopped trying and pulled my arm out of the car. I brushed his face along the way, and he fell back dead. A voice behind me startled me from my horrific trance. It wasn't that of the strange man that I had talked to, so I spun around in surprise. I found myself looking at the man that had just perished before me. He looked from me to the corpse in the driver's seat, and then back to me. I understood I was death. The dead man tried to say something, but was overcome with surprise and emotion. Finally, he managed to stutter out a single word. "Why?" he asked, trembling all over. Not knowing at all what to say, I thought back to what the man had told me about death earlier. It's your time. There are no exceptions. Good luck. Dennis came from behind him. He put a hand on the man's shoulder, smiling sadly to him. "Time to go," he said in a voice that somehow immediately soothed the man, who then disappeared as if turned into vapor. Dennis turned to me. "It's always easier to give the full explanation after the first. Soul has been passed on. You are now death, but not forever. You see, there aren't as many cases where someone is brought back to life as there are deaths, obviously. So right now you are in a hospital bed, kind of in limbo between life and death. And for the next day or so you will be death until a conclusion has been made. UW. Hair made for this. This was meant for you, but it doesn't make sense. If I just watched all this happen into minutes, how much time has passed for my body where I lay, that doesn't matter. Although I serve death by departing souls from earth, I do not know whether death is an actual person. But regardless, death has a system that never fails. If you hadn't gotten into an accident yesterday and had been home watching the news, you probably would have seen this accident. Death uses a sort of, rip in time to allow a new person to work as death. It's all so confusing, it's easier to just continue on. So what do you say? Can we just move on to the next person for me to kill? No thanks. Remember what I said earlier? It will happen, one way or another. Fine. Suddenly we were standing in a small convenience store. I looked around, wondering who could possibly die. A young man stood by the register, and I hoped that it wouldn't be him. The door opened and the bell jingled lightly. A man walked in with a ski mask covering his face. Oh God, please no, I thought to myself. The man quickly approached the counter and pulled a small revolver out of the jacket he was wearing. He pointed it at the man and gestured to the cash register. A woman in the store noticed and suddenly let out a scream. The thief turned to the woman, pointing the weapon at her. The rest happened very quickly. 3 shots rang out, and the would-be robber fell to the ground. The cashier stood with a small pistol smoking in his hands, an open drawer behind. The counter revealed several rounds of ammunition. I looked down at the dying man, let him bleed for a moment, and then put 2 fingers on his forehead. I turned around to see another form of the man without the ski mask. He asked the same question as the first one had. Why? Because you're stupid. This is how you spent the rest of your life, giving a woman a heart attack and making that kid live knowing that he killed someone. Nice life, jackass. Dennis touched him and the robber vanished. Way to be nice and understanding, he said as we went to the next death scene. We were in a hospital room. Simple enough. Lots of people die. In the hospital, there were voices drifting into the room from the hall. You may want to say your goodbyes. I'm very sorry. It has spread too far into his brain. There is no chance. Once again, I am very sorry. At this, the sound of a woman's muffled cries loudly filled the room. I looked to see a young boy in bed, his hair gone and his face sickly pale. I looked at Dennis. Are you serious? I asked him. He's got to be less than 12 years old. Remember, no exceptions. Dennis said calmly. I started to approach the boy when there was a knock on the door. I turned to look, and the woman, apparently more composed, entered the room. She walked straight past me and sat in a chair next to the boy's bed. Hi, sweetheart, she said, taking the boy's hand into hers. He croaked back a hello, hardly able to open his eyes. Now I know that this is all going hard, but everything is going to digest. I heard what the doctors said. Mom, I love you. Screw this, I said to Dennis. I'm not doing it. Fine, he said, but remember, I warned you. We were suddenly in the hallway of the hospital, standing near an older doctor and the woman outside the room we were just in. I can't explain it, the doctor said. It's like the cancer just disappeared. The mother rushed into the room, followed by the doctor. Dennis and I followed. The same boy sat on his bed, completely different. His face had color, and he seemed happy. It's some kind of, the doctor began, but then suddenly grew quiet. Do you hear that sound? I listened, and I heard it. It was the sound of bacon on a pan. Or, more accurately, the sound of gas escaping a container. Suddenly, the cord to the television that was currently playing fell halfway out of its socket, and a few sparks flew into the air. This was apparently enough to cause a huge explosion, and causing me to have to take the lives of several people, including the boy, asterisk, 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 asterisk. Only one more left to go, Dennis said cheerily, and then I get to go home, right? I'm tired of this. I was so excited to start living again. After about 2 days of taking over others' lives, it would feel great to actually take a hold of my life again. We were suddenly in another hospital, which happened quite often. In my excitement, I wasn't even paying attention. Clear, a doctor shouted from a crowd of white-coated assistants. A bare male chest lifted up along with the sound of electrical buzzing. I approached, hid the crowd, and tried to get through to see my newest victim. I looked down at the table that the person was lying on. To my astonishment and horror, I looked down to see my own body lying on the table. I looked up for Dennis, but he was gone. I'm not sure how long I stood with the other doctors who were trying to save me, but I finally made a decision based on what I had learned. I placed a hand on my corpse, and I was then thrown back into that deep, dark, never-ending darkness that surrounds death.